Today's guest is Amanda Johnson. Amanda is a message strategist and mindful messenger coach. She helps aspiring speakers, authors, and coaches craft their message, expertise, and stories for maximum impact on their audience, their brand, and their bottom line. After years of engaging, clarifying, and helping others develop powerful messages as a student, teacher, and master writing coach, Amanda uncovered her own. The decision to share it launched her own journey of personal and professional transformation that quickly made her limited life unrecognizable. In her best-selling book, Upside Down Mommy, Amanda shares the butterfly approach philosophy responsible for her success as a parent, wife, messenger, and coach. In today's conversation, we talk about the power of story, healing, and writing. Thanks for joining us. And now on to the show. Hello, Amanda. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. We recently met through a mutual connection, and I was so impressed by your work because as a message strategist and mindful messenger coach, I feel like that work is so valuable in the world, helping speakers, authors, and coaches, craft their messages. And I know that's personally, it's something that's really, really can be challenging to do. So what inspired you to do this work? What was kind of the turning point in your life that brought you into this work?
Well, I was always a good writer. And then but I did have a high school teacher who told me that he hoped that I went to college and they kicked the fluff out of me because he was like, I'm tired of all the fluff. I'm sure you have something else to say. And he was right. I got into a classical books program and they knocked all the fluff out of me. I had to write like a 30-page paper every semester and I had to keep turning it in until it was acceptable. And after the first semester of, more than a dozen turn-ins and kickbacks, I thought there has to be a better way to do this. And so over the course of my education there, I learned that if I spent 90% of my time on the planning, then the writing could happen in 10% of the time. So I became a really good technical writer, decided to become a history teacher, got into that system and went, whew, that is just way too much work for me emotionally. Like I wasn't doing very well on the emotional side, lots of personal stuff going on. And I had a little boy and I was like, I have nothing left to give him at the end of the day after I go home from hanging out with all the gangbangers and pot smokers and drug dealers who are, really should probably just take a nap in my classroom, like instead of try to learn something. So I was offered a position with a friend of a friend who had this amazing writing instruction company, best educator I have ever met. And she created this amazing curriculum that allowed us to help people up-level their writing skills and pass basic skills tests in very short amount of time. It was ridiculous how quickly people were moving and passing these tests. And when we went out to shop it, this is a great entrepreneur lesson. When we went out to market this, we went to the wrong market. We went to a group of people who were entrepreneurial and who were already writing and developing content. And so it kind of turned into an editing business because they didn't want to learn how to write well. They wanted us to fix what they had done. And so I started helping with that. My mentor in the company asked me to work on her book. And so she invited me over for lunch to talk about the book. And I was amazed that she could write a book so quickly and have it be such a powerful experience for me as a reader. And I asked her, how does it feel to know that people are going to read this book? By the end of the last chapter, they're going to be changed. Like, this is a really amazing book. And she said, oh, it's a really great feeling. When are you going to write your book? And I was like, what? And that's what I did. I laughed because the first thought that I had was one that I hear a lot from messengers, which is, what would I say? And why would anyone listen to me? Because, see, on the surface, I was a performer, I was a high achiever, I was doing really well in her company. And underneath the surface, I was like broken marriage, broke in so many ways, disconnected from my purpose, just trying to figure it out at 27, why am I here? And so when she asked that question, it hurt. I kind of played it off like, how about I write a book and then you can put your PhD on it? You give me the topic, tell me what you want to say, I'll write it. And she said, no, you have something to give today. What is it? At that point, I gave her a hug and I turned on my heel and I left. I was it was just like so much emotion. I knew I was going to collapse if I had tried to stay there.
I have to interrupt you and ask, like, you said it hurt to hear that and like all this emotion came out. What do you think that was about?
I think that she just nailed, like, that question brought not the answer that I wanted it to. Like, oh, this is what I have to give. Like, everyone wants to know, like, this is my superpower. This is my gift to give to everyone. But for me, I had no answer. What is my purpose? What would I say? Why would anyone listen to me? I felt like a total fraud at that point because I was really successful and bound for this amazing life. Everyone like, oh, look at what Amanda's going to do, And I was like, dude, I don't know if I want to live anymore. Like, I really had those thoughts and feelings. And so it just kind of brought all that to the surface. So I started asking myself, got in my car, driving down this windy mountain road stupidly because I'm just pouring tears out of my eyeballs. And I'm asking myself this question: what value do I have to give to the world today? What value do I have to give to the world today? And about halfway home, I remembered I had this memory flash of something that had happened really recently to this experience. And it was this moment where my son, we were living with my grandmother at the time, and she was like trying to co-parent, and I was really fierce about parenting. Like, this was the one thing that I was going to not mess up because I did not want him to end up like me. Right. So like at 2 or 3 years old, um, they're having this conversation and I'm hearing them in the bathroom, and he broke her mirror. And she panicked and she called him a bad boy. And I was ready. I don't know. I was running down the hallway. I don't know what I was going to do to her, but I was going to try to fix that because that was like the one thing that you don't say to my kid. And so I'm hauling butt down this hallway and I see him with his hands on his hips looking up at her. He's got to be probably 2 about this time. And he's like, I am not a bad boy. I just made a bad choice and I'm sorry. And I was like, well, my work is done. Parenting complete. And so I had this whole memory while I was driving home from hanging out with my mentor. And I realized, like, this is something that I am doing rather well because I have all this psych development, child development, and all of these, I helped raise my little sisters because my mom had to work. So I had all this experience with little kids and all of this knowing of what, all of the adults in my life, well-intentioned as they were, the impact of their words on me was painful. And it left me feeling purposeless and paralyzed at 27, even though the world was my oyster. I was a smart girl with a ton of opportunity, but I was paralyzed. So I get this idea, like, what if, this is 2007, the secret, remember the law of attraction, is taking the world by storm. And I thought, what if I wrote a book? Because that's essentially what I'm doing, right? I'm using the law of attraction with my son. And so what if I wrote a book for, kids books and parent books? And I saw this whole series of books, 7 books. Oh my gosh, I'm just going to write all of this. And I'm going to attract one of those secret teachers. And it was like I had this huge vision just kind of downloaded to me. So I get home, I got my mascara all over my face, and I told my husband, like, I just need an hour. And I went, and because I had learned how to map content in college, I had this, ability to just map it all out. Like, I saw the 7 things and I was just going to start writing. I grabbed an editor, an illustrator, and that was what I was going to do. And I was going to attract a secret teacher. And I told everyone because I went from being like purposeless to on fire inside of 45 minutes, right? Like a completely different universe I was living in. And 3 months later, one of the secret teachers walked into a sizzler behind me and invited me to a workshop.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was like, oh my God, what kind of magic is this? Basically, like the inspiration to write and to figure out what is the thing that I have to give that is unique to me, that only I can give to the world, and to put it down on paper and to offer it as something that could change the world and make it a better place. That inspiration completely changed the trajectory of my life. Completely. I mean, I stepped into that workshop with that mentor and realized all the stuff that was going to keep me from my dream, all that pain that was paralyzing me, all those old stories, all the wounds. I saw it all and I was like, well, I don't think I'm going to be able to help people until I take care of some of this stuff. And so I did. And I started working on me. And in the meantime, people started showing up with more books to edit. And I started feeling bad that I was taking 4 years of their blood, sweat, and tears and hacking it up into pieces and giving it back to them in a more powerful way. And I thought, God, what if I could save people years of work by helping them from the beginning? And so in 2009, I decided to launch True to Intention and help people with their messages, books, signature talks, and such from the beginning.
As you talk, what comes up for me is, you said I did all this personal work. I'm wondering kind of what did you do during that time? Like what could we learn from that experience?
I remember the moment that it was one of those workshops there was a sentence stem that was like the thing that made it feel like razor blades were coming through my throat as the thing was coming out. It was like, oh my God, am I really going to say this? And it was like, if you really knew me, you would know that I look really good on the outside, but I'm a hot mess on the inside. And so I had to face the reality that my marriage was a mess. My finances, like I did not see my own value. I wasn't charging what I needed to live on. And those were just like the surface things, right? So as I stepped into that work and started doing these workshops and learning how to facilitate them for other people, it just kept deepening my own work because I could only take them as far as I had gone. And so they would bring something up in the room and it would bring something up for me, and I'd go back and I'd do that work, and then I'd come back with more of me. A lot of it for the first few years, a lot of it was mental and emotional mapping, like just identification. Why am I in all of this pain? Like where did this all start? So I was looking at the stories and the things, the memories and the experiences that I had kind of just pushed out of my consciousness because they were just, I couldn't make sense of them. I couldn't love people. I felt like I couldn't love the people who were involved there if I had to face that all the time. And so as I was mapping it, looking at it, acknowledging it, speaking it, sharing it with someone else, and getting that unconditional love back in a room full of strangers, right? That we're all facing their stuff. It started to create that level of safety for me to really look at what is the stuff that I have to release and reevaluate and rewrite. What are these stories? And so I did a lot of the mental and emotional stuff, and it was extremely helpful. After a few years, it kind of went into the deeper layers of like my spirituality and my core beliefs and about God. So, the first level was just like all the characters in my story, right? These are the heroes, these are the villains. This is what they've done to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
this was my part in it. That there's that part, and this is the thing that I can do to change the story. And then, deeper underneath that were all of the beliefs that I had to begin to shift and create a new experience between me and I call it the wind. the universe, God, whatever you call it. The wind works with my butterfly approach. So, and now I'm on the physical journey because I've done all of this internal work, which is, it has taken up like all of my freaking time while I'm, helping other people and trying to work on myself. By the way, helping other people, isn't it like the best way to work on yourself? Because you're like helping people and they ask you what you think about certain things and you listen to yourself and you're like, wow, that's good. I should be living that. That would be great.
It's true, right? Like I always say, can your business or your creative work, can it be a healing for you? And it sounds like yours was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I really believe that. I have some people who come to me, they've got a book that is all about just focus on their expertise. Like they're coming because they want something that they can use as a calling card. And they're very clear that they just need to put their expertise in there. But they hate the way that they wrote it. They're just like, God, I wouldn't read this book. This is boring. How do I spice it up and add some story and some branded pieces to it to make it more me, because they feel like they didn't get themselves onto the page. And so I help people with that. And that's not a huge transformational journey for them. But the majority of the people who come to work with me, I think that it's the same story for them. There's this desire and impulse to help change the world and heal the world. And they have real tools and real knowledge and insight that has helped them to overcome so much already. And there's more. And so when they get to the point where they're getting ready to like step out and be a, whatever that term is for them, a thought leader, an expert, a teacher, a coach, like whatever they see that being, when they get to that point, they shrink and they start to ask themselves, is anything that I've learned real? Because look over here in my life, this part over here isn't lining up with what I'm saying here. Do I have enough credibility? Should I go get another degree or certification before I share what I know? And all of these things, come up that kind of show them where they're really at. So I feel like that inspiration to move forward and give something to the world is kind of like this really cool trick that the wind plays on us. All of us people who are kind of raised to go help and heal and take care of other people. It's like, here, go do this. And then like you get into it and you're like, oh my God, this was for me. This was for me all along. Like my message saved my life. My message saved my life. Like that's the end of the story, because it helped me a lot in the beginning. Right. But as I got into the work and I started sharing it with other people and I stayed open to everything that was coming to me, it was like this refining process for my own message. And in order to stay in the game, I had to live it. I had to practice what I call the butterfly approach at every single turn. One thing that it did was it kept anchoring in the power of what I had to give, because I was using it to keep myself moving forward, and as well as helping other people. Secondly, it just kept adding more and more and more power to the healing process that I was in. And you know what it's like, the more people that you help, the more people who show up to reflect parts of you that you need to work on, right? It's like it just accelerates. And so I feel like we intuitively know that that's going to happen. And so there's a part of us that's like, okay, we really need to get our stuff together before we get out here and speak or put this in a book. Or how do I engage that stuff in the middle and not allow it to paralyze me and stop me from moving forward completely, but also honor the process that I'm in, that maybe I have a little bit more work to do. And maybe, just maybe, writing and speaking are the ways to do that.
I love that. And you keep referring to your butterfly philosophy. And one thing I love about that is I'm a Martha Beck certified life coach, and she talks a lot about the butterfly metamorphosis and the cocoon and so I think it's for me it really resonates. So I would love it if you could share a bit about that philosophy?
Sure. When my kiddo was really little, and now he's like 14 and towers above me. Um, so when he was really little, I was shopping, I think it was like at a TJ Maxx or something, and I saw this little butterfly bungalow kit that you could get. And I didn't have any money, but I figured out how to pay for it, thank God. So basically what you do is you take home this little butterfly netted bungalow, and then you order the larva through the mail, and they show up. And so it was like this experience of getting to watch this entire process live with a little kid, which adds so much juice to it, right? Because we look at it, I could walk past that thing like once a day and just glance at it and be like, oh, they're in the cocoon phase. All right. Right. But my kid was like sitting outside of it, just watching it for like 10, 20, 30 minutes at a time, asking me questions like, what do you think they're doing? Mom, look at how much they're eating. And look at how fast they're growing. Like their attention and what they notice, it was amazing for me to witness. And so we get to this point where we're watching, I call them the magic eggs. And that for me is very similar to the seeds of our purpose, right? These eggs they have a blueprint inside of them that is going to become a butterfly eventually. That is what they're here to do. And so for me, that magic egg is like, what's your purpose? What's your message? What's that value that you have to give to the world? And then they come out of the eggs and they start acting crazy. Like, I don't know if you've ever spent a lot of time watching these things, but they move so fast and they eat and eat and eat and eat. That reminds me of that phase of time right after I realized, oh my God, this is the value that I have to give to the world. And then it was like magic, right? I mean, I call it the caterpillar craze. It was like I couldn't write enough. I couldn't, I was getting all of this information and all of these resources and people and just these magical things were happening to me. I was just like taking it all in, taking it all in, taking it all in. Not a lot of getting things out at this point, right? I'm just like in action, just following whatever the impulse is. And then we actually were there for the moment that they flipped upside down. That was a revolutionary moment for me because they just did it and it took hardly any time at all. And I realized that upside down is like the thing that we all resist, right? It's like they're going into a place of total surrender to the process that is coming. They are relaxing into it like it's nothing. And yet when we're getting ready to go through a growth phase or a transformation phase, man, oh man, what can we distract ourselves with? Right? And so they just like relax into it. And I realized, how can I relax into this? Because when I started to see all of that pain coming up, my achiever and my ego just wanted to get certified in that program that I was in. I was so mad that all of this emotional stuff was keeping me from achieving my goal. And it was like, Amanda, relax. It's okay. It's this necessary thing. And then we get to the cocoon phase, and the cocoon phase was an interesting phase because you had to take it very carefully. Oh my God, so carefully out of this little container that they came in and hang it up inside the bungalow. And so this is a really fun thing to do when you have a 2 or 3-year-old who's jumping up and down right next to you, trying to like see everything. You're just terrified that you're going to ruin these butterflies. I put them in the bungalow, and then it was like teaching Aaron, you need to understand that if you hit this thing too hard, one of those cocoons could fall and then it won't become a butterfly. And one day, my grandma of all people hit it a little bit too hard and one of the cocoons fell, and he was just mortified. I mean, he just sobbed. He was like, we ruined the butterfly. And I thought, in that moment, I realized like that was how I was parenting him. I was trying so hard not to mess it up. Like, I just want to figure out how to keep him inside of this safe space until he becomes who he's supposed to become, because it is clear that he already knows it somehow. And so what are the words that I can use that will make it safe? What are the boundaries and structures? What are the communication practices? What are the rituals that I can put in place that will help him to go through this growth process in the easiest and quickest way possible without me just totally effing it up. That was like my huge aha around the butterfly piece. And I realized that that's the point as I was beginning to work through my own healing process. And as I began to help other people through their healing processes, facing their stories and writing their books, that was the most important piece. How do we make it safe enough for you to actually face this stuff? Through rituals, through different practices that they have, through the structure of a community, through the structure of a schedule, through this, like what are those structures that make it safe and possible for us to move through this phase, to allow ourselves to, they dissolve into goo. They dissolve into goo and then they reorganize into this beautiful creature. For me, like that's the most important thing that I work on with the client, because that's something that they take with them forever. Then they know how to create safety. Every time they get up to one of those scary edges, they know exactly what to do. It keeps them from getting paralyzed as they expand and grow.
Yeah. One of the things that I read on your website is that if there are any unhealed places in your story, they will reveal themselves as you write. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be what you're kind of saying, right?
Yeah. Because, we have something to share with the world, and we get to the point where we want to share it, right? And so it's funny what happens. Is this our mind and ego, or is this just like this great trick that we play on ourselves to say like, oh, okay, I'm going to write this all down, right? And when we're thinking about it, it's usually very conceptual. Like, well, all they need to do is change their mindset about this, and then they need to, use their bodies to do this, and then they need to use their minds to do, right? Like, it's very ethereal and conceptual and abstract. But then they read it back and they're like, oh, that's boring. There's a ton of books that talk about this stuff. So how is mine different? Well, how did I learn this? And then the stories come. And then they're like, oh, no. Well, okay, maybe I'll just tell the good parts of the story. But the good parts make no sense without the bad parts. Because those highs are not, they make like, they're so what's to other people who don't understand where you came from. But when you start talking about where you came from thing, then it's like the first level is exposure to yourself, like getting real about what really happened to you and what you actually really did. What was your responsibility in it? And then it's the other level of exposure of the people that you love, because often by this time, some of those relationships have changed or healed. And now it's like, oh my God, I have to go back there and just talk about this stuff. This is going to be mortifying to them. I'm going to hurt my mom by telling her how depressed I was as a kid. I have the next version of my story that I need to tell right now as we're having this interview. And I'm in the question of like, when is the right time to tell this story? Because it's about my dad, and he just passed in January, and I'm having a completely different experience about it than my siblings are. And so as I'm getting ready to like step into my reemergence, so to speak, the next level, I'm asking myself these same questions. How much of the story do I tell? I don't want to impact unnecessarily. And also, at what point does it become like, this is something that I have to do, and so I just have to figure out how to do it the best that I can with help from my friends who will say, oh, that was ugly. That didn't need to be that ugly, and just get it out there and not take responsibility for how it's going to land. So it's learning that. But yeah, it takes you right to those old stories. And I think that really is one of the main reasons why people take 4 or 5 years to write a book and then don't do anything once they're done. It sits in their folder on their computer.
All of that you're saying is very touching on things that are very present for me at the moment as I start to own some of my stories. And I think were you there this weekend at the Empowered event? Were you there in my session? You were, weren't you?
I was.
Yeah. And so you saw me, right? Like try to move into that. And I had a massive kind of healing happen for me afterwards. all of the things that you're talking about are things that like I find myself struggling with. And so I know firsthand that what you're saying is so, so true.
Yeah, it's amazing. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be this difficult thing that happened. I mean, I had one client who came. I did my first 7-day retreat in April. So fun. The first hurdle is always like, what am I going to say and how am I going to say it and how do I get my voice onto the page, right? And so we work on structure. But the next hurdle is always like getting into the process of writing or creating that signature talk or taking the project forward. And those things feel like Mount Everest to people. So I thought, what if I could show them that they could actually get one chapter done in 3 days? This one client came to this event. She already had her structure in her mind that she thought. And so as we went through this process and it got really clear, she realized like, oh my goodness, there's such a deeper message it's even deeper than what I thought it was, because we started pulling back even further into her story. She had the most amazing things happen while she was writing her story because now we're all sitting at the table and I'm witnessing them in the process of writing, right? And so part of the thing that happens when you're writing is that in order to write something really powerfully and effectively, like to make it so that the reader easily inserts themselves into your story and your experience and walks the journey with you. In order to do that, you have to go back to those moments and kind of like immerse yourself in that moment. As she did that, I watched her physiologically start to feel incredible levels of anxiety. And she was like, and she would just close the computer and she'd look at me, she'd be like, oh my God, I forgot how horrible this felt. Like, I'm right back there. Then it's the process of like, how do you make it safe for you to go back there and get out of there and come back to your life? Right. And so we did a lot of coaching around that, but she had all these aha moments that I got to witness where it was like, I forgot the level of pain that I was in, which by the way, is the level of pain that her reader is in. And so if you don't go to that level of pain, they don't believe you. Like, oh, you weren't really here. And so it like created this momentum for her of like, oh my God, now I know where they're really at. And I'm going to do everything that I can to help them get to where I've come. And so as she's writing, there are these things that happen. Like, she's got such a funny writing voice. And so she's telling these stories about all of these things, these conversations that she's having with her husband. And she looked up at me and she was like, you know what? I mean, he did everything. She had this because she was writing the story, she had this new awareness of just how far her husband had gone for her in that moment. And so what ended up happening by the end of the retreat is all of this acknowledgement and appreciation and gratitude, and their relationship was different in 7 days. So it doesn't have to be like this terrible thing that happened. It can be like you see the unseen heroes in your story. Because you're like, wait, how did I get from here to there? Oh yeah, that person came in. Oh my God, that person was an angel. And it just like deepens your level of gratitude and ownership of the magic in your story.
Amanda, this conversation has just been really lovely. And before I let you go, I have just a couple more questions. And the first one is, if you had one piece of advice for a woman out there who's trying to own her story, what would it be?
Find someone to witness it with you. Whether it's someone like me, like a coach who knows how to witness it, or just a friend who can be there when you're like getting right up to those villain parts and having to realize things about your story that you didn't see before. Just have that level of support.
Yeah. That's awesome. And if people want to connect with you and your work, where should they go?
Well, the website is True to Intention. So TRUETO and then the word intention.com. There's actually a free call series on there. It's a really good way to kind of get to know me and how I work and this butterfly process and also like what this whole messenger journey looks like, really, because there are a lot of people who get stuck at, oh, I'm just going to finish the writing. That's like their one goal, and they don't see all of the other stuff that can happen afterwards. And so I did this call series after I wrote my book, which, by the way, because of what happened in my life, I had to do in less than 3 months. So I talk about like, how did I do that? Right. Publish and launch it in less than 3 months. And so I share all of the tricks that I used in there. And I also invited some of the messengers that I've worked with to share what worked for them in each of those phases. So it's full of a lot of value. So if people are really serious about getting clear about their stories and getting their work out into the world, then it's a good place to start.
Lovely. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real treat.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, I invite you to share it with your colleagues and friends. And I'd be grateful if you'd head on over to iTunes and leave a review so that more women can get the message. Finally, if you love what I'm doing, check out my website at superwomanproject.com, where I help women declare ownership over their professional lives to achieve more money, success, and joy. Thank you, and until next time, take good care.